Hello, my fellow chemists. In this video, we're going to take a look at significant figures, how significant figures are determined, why they're important, and if you're looking at a number, you can tell how many significant figures are in that number. This video is labeled as a basic video because there's really no background information that you need to know or understand to be able to understand the material covered in this lecture. So let's get started. So, what are significant figures? Significant figures measure how precisely or tell you how precisely a number was measured. And in the field of science and chemistry, very often you're dealing with numbers that were measured. So, the reader needs to know what level of precision was used when those numbers were measured. To kind of give you an example of that, let's pretend that you go out and you buy a bathroom scale and you buy a relatively cheap one that costs, say, maybe $20. And on that scale, it has a little reading. You can go and put your feet on there. And this relatively inexpensive scale, when you step on it, it says 150.1 pounds. Well, that scale was made so that it had a precision out to the tenths of a pound. Now let's say that you go out and you buy a different bathroom scale and you buy a much more expensive one. Let's say maybe this is a $150 bathroom scale. And on the outside, for the most part, it looks the same. And you hop on there, put your feet on there. But now when you get on this scale, it reads 150.16 pounds. Well, this scale was made to be precise out to the hundredths position. So that number that was measured, your weight, is measured more precisely. So this second scale would report that you have more significant figures in the digit, in the measurement. You would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 significant figures as opposed to 1, 2, 3, 4 in the other scale. So that's what significant figures are. That's why they're important. They let you know how precisely a number was measured. Well, let's talk about if we see certain numbers, how can you tell how many significant figures are in numbers that we have written down? And there's 5 basic rules that you follow to determine whether a number or a digit that you see is considered to be significant or not significant. The first rule is an easy one. It says any non-zero number is a significant figure. So if we look up here at example 1, the 9 is significant, the 4 is significant, the 3 is significant, the 1 is significant. Doesn't matter whether it's on the left or the right-hand side of the decimal. The 5 is significant, the 7 is significant, and the 3 is significant because they're all non-zero numbers. So this number here has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 significant figures in it. The other 5 rules, rule 2 through 5, they all deal with zeros, when a zero is significant or when a zero is not significant. So rule number 2 says zeros between non-zero digits are significant. So if we look at example number 2, 803. Well, you know the 8 and the 3 are significant. The 0 between them is significant as well. So this number 803 has 3 significant figures, the 8, the 0, and the 3. If we take a look at this other number, 702,001, obviously the 7 is significant, the 2 is significant, and the 1 is significant. But all 3 of the zeros are in between non-zero numbers. So they are also significant. So this number has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 significant figures. Okay? So anytime a 0 is in between non-zero numbers, they are significant. Rule number 3 talks about zeros that come after non-zero digits, but after or before a decimal point are significant. So let's take a look at a couple examples of that here. So if we have 94.00, now we're starting to look at numbers with decimals in them. Okay, so the 9 is obviously significant, the 4 is obviously significant. These two zeros come after a non-zero number and they're after a decimal point. So they are both considered significant. It's almost like in that bathroom scale example, they're telling you that this 94 number was measured out to the hundredths position. That's how precise that number was measured. So those are both considered to be significant. So this number has 4 significant figures in it. If we then also take a look at this example 101.0, well, the 1 is significant, the 0 is significant. Now this is a 0 that's between two non-zero numbers, so that was from rule number 2, so that is significant. And then we have a 0 that's at the end or after a decimal, so that is also significant. So in this example here, you have 4 significant figures. So up to this point, all of the zeros that we've seen are significant if they come in between non-zero numbers or if they're at the end of a decimal number, they are significant. So let's take a look at a case where zeros are not significant, and this is rule number 4. Zeros that come after a non-zero digit but without a decimal point at the end are not considered significant. So if we take a look at this example 4 down here, the 2200, the 2 and the 2 are significant because they're not zeros. These are zeros that come after non-zero numbers, but there's no decimal place. So neither one of these are considered to be significant. So this number here only has 2 significant figures. If we take a look at the next number, 4030, obviously the 4 and the 3 are significant because they're non-zeros. This is a 0 that comes between two non-zero numbers, so it's significant. But this 0 at the end, it's at the end of a number, and it's not a decimal number, so it is not significant. So this 4030 has 3 significant figures. And then if we take a look at the number 20, the 2 is significant, but the 0 at the end of the number that does not have a decimal, that is not significant. So the number 20 would have 1 significant figure. Now, let's just take a look at that one a little bit more detail. If I had changed this to 20 and put a decimal point at the end of it, now it would have 2 significant figures because it's the 0 at the end of a number, but it's before or after a decimal. So that would change it to 2 significant figures. So if there's a decimal, that changes whether the 0 is significant or not significant. If we take a look at the next examples down here, rule number 5, zeros that are in front of non-zero numbers are not significant, even if there's a decimal involved. So if we take a look at this example down here for number 5, obviously the 4, the 8, and the 7 are significant, but these zeros are in front. They're the very first numbers that you see, even though there's a decimal there. They're the very first numbers in this overall term here, so they are not significant. So this number has 3 significant figures. We take a look at this next example here, 10.048. In this example, the 1, the 4, and the 8 are significant. There is a decimal. These zeros are in between non-zero numbers, so that makes them significant. So there's a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 significant figures in that number. And for the last one, we have 0.05. The 5 is significant, and these zeros are at the front of a decimal number, so they're not considered significant. So this number has one significant figure. So that's how to determine, just by looking at a number using these 5 rules, how many of the digits in that number are significant. Basically, anything that's not a 0 is significant. A 0 that's in between two non-zeros is significant. Zeros that are in a decimal number before or after the decimal, if they're at the end of the decimal number, they're significant. If they're before the decimal and there's also a non-zero number there, they're significant. Zeros at the end of a number with no decimal are not significant. And zeros in a decimal number that are at the very front of that number are not significant. One last thing to be aware of is if you look at scientific notation, any of the numbers in the front coefficient are considered significant. So if we had 6.03 times 10 to the 14, all 3 of these numbers in the front are significant. So this would have 3 significant figures. If you had a number like 5 times 10 to the 20th, the only coefficient number you have out front is the 5, so this has 1 significant figure. So for scientific notation, any number that's before the multiplication sign is significant. All of those digits are significant. All right, that's the end of the video. I hope you learned something. If you did, make sure to subscribe and like, and I'll see you in the next video.